There you go. People can just pop in. Hey, Andy, welcome. So, welcome to Promote Profit Publish. I'm your host, Juliette Clark, and this is a free training again today. So, if you're someone who prefers to see the slides and see what's actually going on, listening to this podcast might be for you, but you can go catch it over on YouTube and actually see little Ally's pretty face and what's going on in her background and her slides and all that. She's so darn cute. So, before we get started, I want to remind you guys we are running the AI Author Academy again in September. Some really amazing stuff happened for people last time. I showed them programs that they could actually put their book in and create a course or create a quiz or whatever it was. There's a program out there that is just so powerful for all of it. And hint, it's not ChatGPT. You can sign up for that over at AIAuthorAcademy.com. And if you're not quite sure it's for you, jump on my calendar, chatwithjuliette.com, and we can talk it through and see, if you're ready, you're not ready. If you're just going to hate it and you want to tell me to go away, you can. So anyway, today's guest is Ally Berthiaume. Did I say it right? It's taken me months, guys. You should see how this is spelled. She's usually known as Ally B, but she publishes under AY. So she's got multiple aliases. Maybe you can get into that background, why you have so many names during the course of it. So we know you're not a criminal. We didn't fingerprint her before we started the interview. She is the founder of Right Place, Right Time, her virtual boutique of book coaching and ghostwriting services. Ally serves leaders, entrepreneurs, and visionaries across North America and Europe in writing books that will light up their world and ours. Ally is also an award-winning author of Dear Universe, I Get It Now, Letters on the Art and Journey of Being Brave and Being Me, and the co-author of Do Not Write a Book Until You Read This One with Bridget McGowan Hawkins. Ally, welcome.
Thanks, Juliette. I'm super pumped to be here. Hey, Alita and Andy. Nice to have you here live. And because you're the lucky ducks who showed up at this live stream, that means we can kind of customize our time together, which is my favorite way to go. I will share my screen. We're going to kick off here with strong foundation, strong finish. The who, what, and why every nonfiction author needs to understand before they start writing their book. And I will be pulling in a few principles from my latest Do Not Write a Book Until You Read This One, which you can find at any book retailer near you or online if you prefer to shop online. Number one, I'm hoping Alita and Andy, you can be fully present here today, but I do want you to interact. So please use the chat, ask questions. I'm happy to stop and really make sure that we're clear on something before I move on to the next material. But what I want to know first before we get going is which of these are true for you. I've always thought about writing a book and I'm just getting as much information as I can at this time. I've been told I should write a book. I've written a book and I'm thinking of another, but want to do it differently. I'm in the middle of writing a book right now, but want more insight and expert advice. Some combination of the above or none of the above. I just want to kind of gauge where you're at on this journey. That way I can be thinking of that as I'm giving you some information. So just put your letter in the chat for me so I have a sense of where you are, what your starting line is. Oh, we've got Scott joining us, which is amazing. Hello, Scott. We're just gauging where people are at on their writing path. So if you want to just take a look at those prompts on the screen and let me know where you're at and things, then that would be great. All right, Andy, you've written a book and you're thinking of another, but want to do it differently. Ooh, okay. Follow-up question, Andy. In what way do you want to do it differently? What did you think that you did first time, maybe wrong or incorrect or inefficiently? Give me a little bit of information there. And Alita, you're in the middle of writing a book right now, but want more insight and expert advice. Okay, Alita, your follow-up question is, is there something that's a particular sticking point for you where you could use some extra advice and insight? I'd love to know that, to see if I can hit on that today. Oh, voice and personality. Okay. Andy, what was your first book's genre and what's the second one that you're thinking about?
I did a collaboration book and Christy actually helped with all the editing on that. And I am looking at writing my own book and I've been working with Juliette about that, about putting a little bit more of my personality because I'm a very analytical guy and I normally write very analytical.
So you're going to be working on a nonfiction book?
Yes.
Okay. And subject matter is?
It's health and longevity.
Okay, beautiful. All right, Alita, so let's do your follow-up. On my mic, off mic, with the mic?
Can I just interject for Andy a minute? Andy is like the poor man's Tony Robbins when it comes to health and wellness. So if you ever read Tony Robbins' book, he has all these great solutions, but you've really got to be a millionaire to take part in a lot of the solutions he throws out there. So
Okay.
Andy's a little bit that, but Andy, when he says voice, he's analytical, but he also has this tremendous sense of humor that I think really needs to shine through. And that's what he works with Chris, on too, is she knows him so well, getting that authenticity down.
Okay, cool. Beautiful. That's great context for me to have. So Alida, you're in the middle of writing a book. You need some more insight and expert advice. So tell me a little bit about what you're looking for.
had written more than half of my book, a lot. And maybe if the book's shorter, it'll be done. No, I'm teasing. But my son died a little over a year ago. It was very traumatic for me. He was 49. I just stopped in the water writing it. It was making incredible progress. Okay. And so now it's like I need a kick in the butt. I need to get going again. And what I'm thinking about is that my granddaughter's going off to college here in the beginning of August, and it'll leave a void in my house because she's so vibrant. And so I'm thinking about how that might be my restart. So I'm looking to restart. So I'm looking for anything and everything that can put me back in the zone of writing, which you have to be in the zone, and to embrace my book and just bring it to the finish line.
All right. So for you, Alida, I want you to be thinking about if there's any of these elements we're talking about today that you haven't yet considered. Might be good places to jumpstart. If you've already considered them, I want you to think about whether or not it's time to reevaluate them as a way to start getting back into the material. What we're talking about today, folks, is all foundational stuff, things that I think that you all need to know before you're really like cruising to the finish line. So this is really great stuff for you to be like, did I ask myself that question? How could that actually influence the problem that I'm having? This includes you, Andy, about voice and personality. I think you'll find that the more that you know about the reader, the more that can inform how you want to come across on the page to connect with them. All right, Scott, we haven't heard from you yet though, and I don't want to leave you out. So Scott, you're also writing a book, but need more insight and expert advice. So where's that falling for you in terms of challenges or barriers?
Good morning. First of all, thanks for doing this. I'm happy to be with y'all and meet some new faces. So I appreciate that I can be here and talk with you people today. This is really lovely. I would call it a proposal that I'm working on. So I'm not quite in the middle. I'm really just fleshing out essentially an introduction. What's the book about? That, the basics there. And I'm really working on structure and chapter outlines. And so I know where I'm going. I have a pretty good idea of how I want to do it. My obstacle is myself. I focus way too much on the structure, and I get down into how does this puzzle piece fit here? And so for context, the topic is essentially expose, but it's a institutional expose about some federal policy work that I did for about a decade, which never was successful. Right. So the question I want to say is, why is it not successful? And the not successful is a huge sort of eruption of really bad news for the Department of Justice that came out in April. And what we were doing was supposed to prevent the bad news that came out in April, right? So how do these two things exist at the same time? I don't want to throw anybody under the bus personally. What I want to do is tell this institutional story about, what I think the failures were. So it's an insider look at this kind of thing. And it's a huge project, right? I mean, the policy work was a huge project, trying to figure out the hooks. The bad news is a great hook, but is that enough? There's much more that I want to sort of fill in there. And I just get stuck on the structuring of it. And I don't do enough of just get the writing done.
So Scott, you said you're working on a proposal. Is the proposal something you're putting together for yourself as like a blueprint to lead your writing, or are you trying to get traditional publisher? So you're starting with a proposal to try to get an agent? Trying
to get an agent. Yeah, that's the direction I want to go. I'm hoping by September to be able to shop this around and do something from there.
All right, beautiful. For you, Scott, the things that we're talking about today, all these elements would be in the proposal. So if you haven't gotten to these pieces, right, then you're going to want to think about those pieces, because somewhere in that nonfiction proposal, you're going to need to address them. And, maybe too, there are some things in here that will help kind of get you thinking a little more broadly rather than getting stuck in the weed. Because one thing when it comes to shopping a traditional marketplace, right, is your query letter for your agent can't be so far into the weeds that they throw you into the slush pile. So you're going to need to kind of step up and out and be able to see your book more broadly in terms of, what's its impact, why is it compelling, versus like on chapter 11, page 232, right, which, you won't know yet because if you're shopping your proposal and the manuscript isn't yet written, you're not gonna know that piece yet anyway.
Quickly,
So
Scott, depending on talk to me about agents, depending on which side of the aisle that falls on, I may or may not have a lead for you.
beautiful.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
I am not going to go and reintroduce myself because Juliet did a really great job of doing that for me. She even got my last name right. So there are a lot of extra values at the end of Berthiaume, which makes it super confusing. Birth name is Alyssa. That's what I get called when I'm in trouble. I've been called Ally since I was little because nobody could say Alyssa when I was growing up. So I shortened it. But because I was 5 and didn't know how to spell, I put 2 L's in Ally instead of 1, which is the same way Alyssa is spelled. And then when I became a published author, I decided to go by my first and middle name and initials, which is why it's AY. So that is the story behind why I have so many names. You can call me any of those things and I will respond as long as you are kind about it. Today, what I want to talk about are 3 things, right, that you should really know before you're writing any book. Your who, your what, your why. I really believe strongly that when these 3 things are in focus, the writing process has more ease and you, the author, has more clarity, confidence, and control over what you are doing. And that is why I say strong foundation, strong finish. When your foundational elements are not aligned and in place and you have no idea what you're doing, why you're doing it, or who you're trying to talk to, your manuscript can bloat and get way too big, right? Because you don't have any handlebars or any kind of container around the amount that you're saying or sharing. But likewise, you can also go too thin, right? And have an undercooked project instead. So this is really a way to try to put some shape around it. And it doesn't mean that these things don't evolve with the writing process, but they're nice to start with and really be thinking about to guide you. We don't want you to be like this person. There are pitfalls to writing a book when you don't know what to look out for. Okay. So a pitfall might be that you're not strategic about the idea of writing your book, right? So there's just willy-nilliness happening all over the place. And you're just sitting down hoping that through osmosis, this brilliance is going to come onto the page with no direction, no clarity. You're not strategic about your book's title. Titling is really, really important. It's like your most critical piece of promotional retail. It's the thing that's going to be everywhere and on everything as you start talking about your book. So you need to have a really strong title. We're not going to talk about titling today, but since we're talking about pitfalls, I'm going to mention it. Not being serious about the editor you choose for your book and picking your high school friend who is really good in English class. Please don't hire a professional. Chris is one. You cut corners with the goal of saving money. Please don't cut corners. Books are an investment. You want a professional final product. Put the bucks behind the book. You won't regret doing that. At the end of the day. And you think that your book will make you rich or that it will make a lot of money with little to no effort on your part. Let's just agree that that is not the way that it goes right now. And we're not going to talk about how to put in the effort necessarily, but we will talk about the effort and why that's important. Again, we want to stack up our why, our who, our what, and those things all lead to this greater thing, which is the outline. And I really believe in having some sort of outline to begin writing with, even if that outline shifts and changes and expands or contracts. Now, all of these things lead to clarity, confidence, and control. They all overlap, which is why they're in these circles. And they all kind of impact one another. So I don't necessarily see it as like one directly leads to another. There's more of an interaction and exchange between these 3 things that we're going to talk about today. A well-developed manuscript with good writing stems from clarity in these 3 things. Okay. Now, well-developed, meaning it's not a one and done. You're going through an iteration process. One draft, edit, revise, another draft, edit, revise. Okay. Until you get it crystal clear. None of this like, well, I wrote it once and I think it's good enough and I'm going to hit publish. No, please don't. That won't serve you. It won't serve the person you're trying to reach. And then all of that time and money and energy that you invested, okay, will be down the toilet because you didn't do your due diligence to make sure that you really maintained the integrity of the process by revising as many times as is required. Good writing, meaning it's organized, it's compelling, it's interesting. There's no gaps in the logic or argument, right? But also it's not so bogged down with unnecessary details and irrelevant information that it's slowing down the reader and they're getting bored or confused. Okay. So it has to be well balanced. Now, I'm mentioning the outline again, because all the pieces we're talking about today would ultimately go into an outline. An outline is a separate document that basically is your GPS or your map to help you reach your final destination. Rather than get in the car and just drive thinking you're going to get to a place that you've never been, right? You usually at least have an address that you plug in to your phone or your car, and it gives you multiple routes that you can choose, and it tells you when to turn, right? This is the success of your outline. It doesn't mean that you might not take a wrong turn, end up with a detour, have bad weather and need to stop, okay? but it's a place to go back to and remind yourself of where you started and what you were intending. And if those intentions shift a little, that's okay, but at least it keeps you on course from getting lost. Now, here are the pieces that I think at minimum should be in an outline. And an outline, Scott, can be very similar to a proposal. Like even if, let's say, you start to shop your proposal to an agent and an agent doesn't pick it up, you having gone through the work of putting together your proposal is still amazing, because now if you choose to go an alternative publishing route, you have your own blueprint and guide to get that book written, and you just publish it differently. This is not a useless exercise, is my point. Everyone should go through the process of writing an outline or proposal for themselves, because it's just that helpful, in all honesty. So your outline, you want to make sure that you're addressing who your reader is, what their problem is, your promise for your book, if you're writing something that's in prescriptive nonfiction. If you're writing something, let's say, Scott, like you're wanting to kind of do this expose on kind of this institutional thing that happened, right? There still needs to be something in it for your reader, right? Informing them, letting them in on the secret, right? So you still want to be thinking about your primary promise, even if the goal of your book isn't necessarily to teach them how to get to a certain transformation. There needs to be something in it for them. You should also have a working table of content. So that's a list of your chapters, and chapter abstract. Those can be summaries of what's going to happen in each of those chapters. It could be a paragraph, it can be a bulleted list, something that makes sense to you and the way that your mind works, but it basically gives you what's going to happen along the way. And if you're doing a traditional proposal, then you might have in there some market research, what you're planning to do for your promotional activities, other books in the market that your book would be compared to. And quite frankly, like Alida and Andy, even if you weren't shopping your book to a traditional market or traditional agent and publisher, you would still want to know, and Juliet would agree, what you're going to do for promotional activities. And you'd still want to know what other books in the market are similar to yours. So these are all things that are in your outline, and we'll talk about 3 of them today. So number 1 rule that I want you to all walk away with, and this is one of the things inside, do not write a book until you read this one, is what I call the ABCD, okay? Approach your book with the commitment to doing it right. So anytime you're getting fatigued in this process and you're thinking about cutting those corners, calling in that high school English, pro, okay? I want you to remember ABCD. Am I doing what is right by my book and by myself at the end of the day? Or am I just tired and need to take a break? But your book is forever. Your name is going on it. It's a piece of what you're leaving behind. So do it right and commit to doing it right from the very beginning. And this is why trainings like this one and having people like Chris and Juliet in your corner and me, like to help steer you along, is so important, so that you don't fall into all of those kind of first-time author or second-time author pitfalls, okay, that so many fall into. The second rule that I want you to commit to memory is that your book is your business and you are the CEO. If we think about the departments of a business and what goes into them, they are immediately transferable and equal to what happens in a book. A business has marketing, a book has marketing. A business has a mission, a book has a mission. A business has a financial plan, a book should have one. You should know what you're intending to spend in time and investment of dollars, okay, before you get going. The biggest thing is that a business has a CEO, the visionary, who believes in what they're doing, understands what they're doing, understands who they're trying to reach, the problem they're trying to solve, the transformation they want people to have. And all of those things are same for an author. They know who they want to reach, what their problem is, the vision that they have for what the book's going to do out there in the world for their reader and for themselves. And here enters our first piece, and that's the why. And there are 2 whys I want you to be considering, and I want you to be asking yourselves. The first why is, why does this book matter to you, the author? And the second is, why does the book matter to them, the reader? It needs to fulfill both of these things. If you don't have a really crystal clear why as to why you're doing it and what you want to get out of it on the other side, it's going to be real hard to keep the stamina of getting through this whole thing, because this is a marathon. And if you don't understand why it's going to be relevant to your reader, then something's going to fall flat in the manuscript. And no matter how you publish, it's not going to do well. You've got to keep your reader in mind. Marathon mindset. This is a long distance run and not a sprint. So some of the things that I want you to be thinking about is, I want you to have the end in mind, like right now. Even though you're all in the beginning stages, right, of developing this book, I want you to be thinking about crossing the finish line. The book's out in the world. So why are you writing this book? What is motivating you? What do you hope the book will do for you? What are you willing to do for it? Okay, this goes back to something I said earlier about one of those pitfalls, expecting to put the book out into the world and have no effort or participation in promoting it. Wrong answer. Did not pass go, did not collect $200. So what are you willing to do for your book as the CEO of this title in order to reach these goals that you have. And what are those goals or objectives? Do people need me to repeat the questions again so that you can think on those a little bit later? Are we good? So one thing that I feel like I cannot not talk about is ROI. This is important because when people are thinking about their end zone and they start to think about dollars and cents and the return on investment on their book, people get tripped up because they're thinking that the ROI from their book is in sales and sales alone, meaning that I sell a book for X number of dollars, and if I sell that many copies, I make back my investment over here. And they're thinking of it in a 1-to-1 ratio. Here's the thing though, it's not a clothesline. It's not linear. It's not, I spent $10,000 on this end. And so if I sell X number of books at this amount, I make the $10,000 back. Number one, that is a very long way to get your return on investment, especially when the average self-published book in its lifetime will sell 250 copies, not 250,000, 250, full stop. When we think about ROI, we need to think about it more like Tangled Christmas Light. Your book is in the center somewhere in there and leads to a variety of different opportunities with money attached that can bring back the revenue. And that's where you get your ROI. So let me provide an example. Speaking as an example, you want to get on a podcast with big numbers, lots of followers, lots of people paying attention. But that podcast is looking for somebody who has a published book and you don't have a published book yet. Once you have the published book, now you can apply to that podcast because you've got one of their requirements fulfilled. They invite you onto the podcast. You now talk about your book in front of the thousands of people who are listening, and a portion of those people go and check you out. It leads to your book page or buying it on Amazon. They now purchase your book. Your book sales are now inflated, but not because you did a direct sell to customer, but because you went through a podcast channel to speak to their audience, to get in front of those people, for those people to actually know about you. It's this windy kind of loop that might lead to those book sales. And a separate example using speaking, you get into a conference to be a keynote speaker. They give you a small stipend to be that speaker. So now you've made money off of speaking. And the reason you got the speaking gig is because you were able to talk about the fact that you are now a published author. So the book has opened the door to the speaking gig. The speaking gig has now paid you. Now we have a little return on investment because that book exists. But not only are you paid to be the speaker, you're able to sell your book in the conference bookstore. And after everybody comes and listens to you talk on stage, they go and buy your book in the bookstore. Not only that, but because you're able to pitch your services or your course or your product, whatever it is, by hearing you, they now go and check out your website and they start to buy from you over there. But all because the book created the door for you to walk through to get into the conference to begin with. It's really about your book being the center of a bunch of different revenue generating opportunities, not just I have a book and now I'm going to go sell the book directly to readers. We have to think broader, bigger. In a real life case scenario for myself, I've had more than one person who decided to work with me after reading Dear Universe, I Get It Now. So $14.99. And then they bought an offer from me that was thousands of dollars. That's ROI. Now, did it happen maybe within the first year of publishing Dear Universe? No, but Dear Universe has been out now since 2020. And I've had multiple people in the last 4 years sign with me as a result of what they learned about me or the way that I wrote my book. The other piece of this ROI puzzle, right, when you're thinking about that as a part of your long-term planning, is that your ROI might not come back in the same shape that it left. You might spend more money at a faster rate than what you're making it back in. It's not book sales or royalty payments that's going to produce the ROI. So here's the other thing about the ROI and people getting it wrong. People assume that they're going to get back the full retail amount of their book after a sale. So my book, Dear Universe, retails for $14.99. Do Not Write a Book is like $34.99 because this thing is a behemoth, okay? And it's hardcover. I only make a portion of that back in a royalty payment because I don't get my payment until everybody else has gotten theirs. Every press is going to be different in terms of your percentage, okay? And what you get, it all depends on their model and how they do it. And of course, in the traditional publishing realm, your percentage is teeny tiny because they've bought the rights to your book on the front end. But the important thing is when you're shopping publishers, you're having those conversations, is to understand the royalty payment calculation. So that's one question you should always be asking. What is your actual cut after everyone else gets theirs? But bottom line, your ROI is really equal to your strategy, effort, and participation. It's not a just upload your book to Amazon and then watch the people flock to it. Nobody's going to know about your book unless you are the spokesperson for it. And that's true of any model. Even in a traditional publishing instance, you are going to have to promote your book. They are not going to do it for you. Another thing to be thinking about on the other side is how you're going to publish. There are lots of options. Traditional is not the only way to go, and neither is self. There are smaller presses that are still in kind of the traditional marketplace. There are hybrid presses. There are independent presses. There are like self-publishing author concierge services. I mean, there are a myriad of ways to publish your book at this point. I like to say that publishing your book should be based on your goals, your mission, and your vision. That should drive your avenue, not necessarily just, oh, self-publishing is easy or traditional is the only one that's reputable, which isn't actually true anymore. But think about what you're trying to achieve and then choose the publishing avenue that matches your vision, mission, and goals for your book. So you got to know your way around the publishing landscape, and that could take us a whole nother hour. So we're not going to dive in here. But what I would say is, since you were all early enough in the process, you have time to be thinking about your options, thinking about your paths, thinking about what avenues are there for you. And actually, do not write a book until you read this one. Shameless plug. Covers a variety of different publishing paths and explains the differences, advantages, disadvantages, cost points, those types of things. I'm going to take a break here for a second. Are there questions about this front end of material on like ROI, publishing, what to think about in the long run? Juliet.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to stay muted. Yeah, one of the things that is really important to understand is that when she talks about everybody else gets paid first, the retailers want 55% of the retail price. So you've got to figure that there's a big chunk that just went right out the door. The cost to print your book, depending on how big it is, what paper you use, what it is, it all costs money. So really, when you're thinking about what are you going to get from each book, it's usually $2 to $4. That's it. Do you agree
I
with
got
that?
a big royalty payment the other day for Dear Universe. It was $10.
I get probably about $20 a month, but I have a lot of books. So, it just depends on what's sold. But it's what I do with it and the money on the other end, because that's where my ROI is selling.
And like I said, my ROI has been potential clients seeing something in me by reading the book and then wanting to work with me. My ROI has not necessarily come from individual book sales, which is why I always get really cracked up when the royalty check comes from Ununiver Press and I try to guess how much it is. And if they sent me something that's below 2 digits, because it's comical, right? I think the first time I got a royalty check, I was really excited. And then my son was like, but it's only $50 or something. That was like right when the book came out and sales were higher and whatever. And I was like, oh honey, when you're older, I'll explain the whole mathematics here, but I'm still excited. Don't rain on my parade. The second part of the why, right? So why does it matter to you? Now, why does it matter to them, your reader? Well, in order to really answer this question, we have to understand better who we are writing to. Now, the reason we've got the big pointy finger is not because I want you to join the US Army, but because I want you to be thinking about someone specific. Here is where I feel like authors can get into trouble. And I've heard this time and time again. Well, what I'm writing about really speaks to anyone. Please never say that. Scott, definitely don't say this in your query letter to an agent. They will throw you right out immediately. Somebody once said to me, when you try to market to everyone, it's like trying to sell dog food to cat people. And I never forgot that, right? Dog food to cat people. Cat people don't need dog food. They're not even gonna be paying attention. So even though you might think, right, that dog food could be kind of important to your cat because maybe the ingredients are similar and any pet owner anywhere would want to know about healthy ingredients in their pet food, it just doesn't translate that way. With billions of books being produced every single year, lots of different ways to publish them and put them out into the market, you're already screaming into a very large crowd. So not having a very clearly defined reader is only going to hurt you further. So I want you to be getting really crystal clear and specific on who you are trying to reach. Know them. I want you to make an avatar. I want you to personify them. I want you to find a picture of who you think you're trying to speak directly to. Give them a name, print that picture out, put it in your writing station, and every time you sit down to write, speak directly to them. It will come through in your writing when you know exactly who you're trying to reach. And now, Andy, this is where I think this is helpful to you. When you can clearly identify who you want to get your health and fitness protocol or method or perspective, whatever it is, but you also want to use that kind of humor, well, then something about your ideal reader is going to want somebody with humor. I want you to think about somebody who you make laugh constantly with that beautiful sense of humor. And then think about, okay, why is it that I feel comfortable being funny with them? How do I come across? What's the situation around which I'm feeling like I can be that type of person that gets me a little bit out of my analytical shell? I want you to kind of like imagine that context and scenario when you sit down to write, to try to unlock and like crack open some of that natural you to get it onto the page. And if there's like a particular setting, so like, let's say you always feel really laid back and you hang out with this friend like at a particular bar, go write in the bar. I know that sounds really strange. Probably not a lot of people are bringing a laptop to a bar, right? But what I would encourage you to do is kind of break down some of the defenses that are having you kind of write a little bit more stiffly, right? To get to the Andy underneath all of that, who is this like funny, humorous kind of guy. I want you to think about mostly the psychographics of your reader. So less geographic location, less age and socioeconomic status. I mean, those things can be informative, but for me, I think it's the psychographics that are where you want to spend your time in developing your avatar. What's keeping them up at night, which might indicate why they want or need your book. And that's a little bit pain point marketing. So the other way to look at this is what transformation or aspiration or desire do they have that your book could fulfill or touch on? So Andy, like in the health and wellness space, right? If they desire, let's say, a beach body without having to join the body movement and pay thousands of dollars, then you might hit on like, okay, I can get you there. You might think about what exactly is the block or barrier to that transformation, but then really work on how to hit on the aspirations, not the barrier. Think about what you know that only you can tell them. Scott, this might be a little bit something for you to think about, right? You were talking about whether or not you've got the right hook. Like you have this inside track, you worked in this area for 10 years, you couldn't prevent the thing from happening, right? But beyond that, you've got knowledge that nobody else has and a perspective on this thing that nobody else has. Play around with that. There might be your hook in there, and that might also indicate who cares about your story. And that's really where you want to be focusing. Who cares and why would they care? Why do they care about the body and health and fitness? Why do they care about this institutional kind of mishap? And when you know what they care about, when you know what's keeping them up at night, when you know what transformation they're seeking, what aspirations they're reaching for, what result they want, what they want to learn about, it informs your what, the promise of your book, okay? And this is why, remember I said how your who and your what and your why are kind of like, they're interacting, they're dynamic. It's not like, oh, you figure out one piece and then you move on to another. Like they all relate to one another. The more that you know about your who and what's troubling them and what's keeping them up at night and what they want, the more that you can dial in on the promise. And that promise needs to be specific. And it's not that there can't be multiple results that they get out of reading your book, but if you were going to hang your hat on one central focus, what is it? What's it going to be? And this is also why I think it's not serving or helpful to an author to just sit down and write without thinking about these things, because then you're just kind of like, you could say all kinds of stuff because you've all lived full lives. You have a myriad of experiences. You might have been in your industry for decades. So if you don't really know what you're driving at, you could sit there and you could just be inflating this manuscript with all kinds of nonsense that nobody really cares about. So get clear as much as you can. Now, some things that you can think about beyond like the reader's struggle, what's keeping them up at night. You could think about if you're already in a space where you're serving client and the book comes with, okay, what you're already doing in the world. Think about how you speak to your ideal clients. Think about their pain points. Think about what you provide to your clients that they're always talking about that they really love. Some solution of yours or process that you give them that they're always raving about. There could be a clue to your promise in there. If there's something in your industry or field that people are getting wrong, or that you have a different approach or perspective on, that might be your unique angle, and there might be a clue to your promise in that. If you have your own framework or methodology that's gotten results, maybe there's something in there that you can focus on. Now, the thing that I will say about any and all of these, a framework or methodology, the thing that other people are getting wrong in the industry or field, that could be multiple things, and it could be like the size of a mountain. The more you put into your book, the bigger your book gets, and the less focused it will become. Consider your book the appetizer platter, not the 10-course meal. Give them a bite-sized portion of what you know, let them digest it, let them get a quick hit, a quick win, and then bring them back for more so that you can keep it kind of self-contained. Chris or Juliet, do you want to say anything about the promise piece? I know that you know that this is important, that you agree with that.
The promise of the big juicy promise in the book, or the what? Yeah, you better live up to it because that's why people bought the book.
Lose it. Yeah. You don't want your back cover blurb to be promoting a promise and then you don't deliver it on the inside.
And that big promise, one big promise promise per book. Don't try to attack everything you know that you know about it in one book. One big promise, deliver on it. And then if you have another big promise, do a second book, one per book.
Yep, love it. So what do you want them to get their hands around by the time they're done reading? That's where you're focusing, right? So that's where you want to putting the ball in their hands. What are they holding by the time they're done? You could think about what you're going to teach them. You could think about what action or transformation that you will inspire. You can also consider when you're thinking about your book long term and you're considering what's going into the book, you can consider the things that are going to elevate that message. Like what other materials might be in there? Are you going to provide reflective questions, charts, graphs, to-do lists, research and study from other places that help illustrate your point? Scott, this might look like pulling in clips from newspaper articles that touched on the issue, but in a very biased, contained way when you've got more of the story. But you can, when you're thinking about your what, you can also be thinking about the kind of ancillary things that help promote the promise and bring the promise into clearer focus within the book. And those are things that you can identify in your outline as well, the various pieces that are going to help you. And so this all leads back to why this book matters to them. When you can understand the problem that they have or the aspiration or what you want to teach, what they need to know, then you can figure out, well, why would it be relevant for them to pick up this book? Now, the thing that maybe I haven't made explicit or obvious, and I will say this now, we've been talking about the who, what, why in terms of you actually writing and developing the manuscript. But the who, what, why also drives your marketing, your promotion, your platform, how you converse about the book on the other side. So these are not just like strong foundational elements from a perspective of good manuscript development. These are things that one must know for the entire life cycle of your book. They are never going to be outdated. Like they are your North Star. So I want to leave it up to questions. I'm going to put a couple things on here for people to just have, but like I want to open it up to dialogue and conversation and kind of hit Scott and Andy and Alita where you're at, like new things that are coming up for you, or we can dive a little further into your particular challenges if you've got specific questions.
Ally, I'd like to add something. So going back to the outline thing, one of the things that, and Scott, I heard you saying this, if you lock yourself into editing before you've written the big picture, that will stall you out. And so what's happening is you're focusing on one little piece and self-editing yourself and you're blocking. So for the outline, if you kind of have a general outline to start, give yourself permission to be a little vague if you have to at certain points, and know that it will come together as you start to write and you know you really love this chapter, it's really awesome, and this one just isn't working. It's okay to let that one go, save it for another book, and then kind of tweak your outline a little bit and just kind of flow with it, and don't edit until after you've got a first draft. Just go, okay, I think this part sucks, but I'm going to keep going anyway.
And actually, ironically, Chris, I think my article in Breakthrough Author magazine, just this past issue, is about that very thing. Like stalling out on the first words or first chapters because you're constantly in revising mode or getting too far down into the weeds instead of getting the whole draft done first. Now with Scott putting together a proposal with nonfiction, they're not necessarily going to need the entire manuscript, but they're going to need some portion of the manuscript. And so really it would be focusing more on whatever subset of chapters or materials that they need for it to be compelling enough for them to pay attention. But you're still going to need a higher level approach to the book within that proposal. Even your chapter abstracts, though those are necessary for your proposal, need to be somewhat contained and not give away too many details because they won't read. Beyond that, though, you want your outline to be real, or your proposal to be really well fashioned, because what you determine in the proposal is going to help you write a really succinct and snappy query letter. And really you have to win the query letter kind of hurdle first, right? So that agents will even request the rest of the proposal, unless of course you find an agent who is wanting the query letter with the proposal, and then you'll have to go, that way. So definitely be sure that you're looking at what the agent specifically wants and do it exactly the way that they are requesting it, because that's one of their top kind of like easy ways to rule people out, is when people just don't follow basic instructions. So just follow each agent that you find, like right to the T. Oh, I like that one. All the thumbs up that are just, I've never seen that. Is that like a new Zoom thing? Because my Zoom, I walked in this morning, it looks totally different. Like they updated the look and everything. And I was like, perfect. The day that I'm going to give a free training and I probably won't be able to find anything because they've changed it, just when I think that I'm finally figuring it out.
Right.
Alita, I want to
exactly.
check in with you. Do you feel you've got some new ways to jumpstart yourself back into writing once the grand kiddo is off this fall?
So I want to thank you tremendously. I have done nothing over the last year but say later, it's not time. I've only felt in the last couple weeks after vacation, which is lovely, that I am getting ready to start again. And so I'm thinking, as I mentioned before, August, okay, when Ashley goes off to college. Now, what you've primed my pump with is amazing different look as I've looked at my book before, right? And I've always known as I've been writing it what I believe the reader would want to get out of it, right? I've had that thought, but you've inspired me to take what I've written tons of notes, okay? To take what you've given me, write more succinct notes. And one of the first things I know I need to do is get familiar with what I've written, right? I mean, it's sitting right here on the floor behind me. It's not far away, and the book of the cover is right here, the cover, I have it. But it's like, I am ready to reread what I wrote. And that's going to take a while because I've written quite a bit. And remember the structure, remember my outline, remember all that was there. It's like, I feel like it will awaken better. You've given me some tools, some thoughts, some processes to use while I'm rereading my book, okay? To see what's really there and what do I need to add? Because I've always felt as I've been writing it that I'm hitting a home run. I've just had that feeling that I have something to say and teach and share, and the readers are ready for this. But I want to prove that to be true. And what you've shared today, thank you so much, is very inspiring to me to get started.
Oh my gosh, you're so welcome. And I'm going to give you an exercise to do while you're reading. Like Post-it note.
Yeah, I have them right here.
Okay.
I mean, I have a drawer full of them.
Oh, perfect. Do you have four colors?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. As you're reading, what I want you to do is pick a color for who, pick a color for what, pick a color for why, and pick a color for new questions that you need to be reflecting on. And as you read, if you hit on something that seems to speak to your who, what, why, write it down in a Post-it note, file the Post-it note away. Post-it note every single time. I want you to have a whole library or collection of Post-it notes by the time you're done reading through your entire manuscript.
Right.
And then go back and look for patterns and trends. If you
Okay.
have a stack of Post-it notes that all are about your who, and the same 7 things keep coming up, that's a clue about your reader because you kept writing it. It kept coming up top of mind. Okay. So read with your stack of Post-it notes, start capturing your who, what, why, look for patterns and trends afterwards, and then go back to the stack of questions separately to say, okay, what new things do I now need to kind of wrestle with after kind of looking at my manuscript with fresh eyes?
Love it. Love that. I love processes like that. So that fits me.
Awesome.
And that would be really helpful for you too.
All righty. Are we ready to wrap this up? This is a long podcast, but well worth it. Thank you guys so much. And
Yes.
go over and check out The Right Place, The Right Time, and see if you can get some tips and help over there. Ally, thank you so much.
Thank
and I'll
you so
see all of you guys soon.